Ah, resume recording. Okay, I'm recording this. So I just lost 5 minutes of my talk, but that's okay. And then I have some resources. I can send this presentation out afterwards, and so you'll have access to those recordings. So I'm not sure how many of you have been exposed to some of the Hebraic concepts for reading and evaluating God's word at a deeper level. And so one of the things I will do also is share a couple of videos that hopefully will explain some of the Hebraic principles around the alphabet and the language in Hebrew. Okay, so let's start. On the screen is a snapshot of Numbers 25, and it's aligned with the Hebrew. Hebrew is read from right to left. Okay, so if you can find Numbers 25 in your Bible and read along with me, just to sort of set the framework. We're not going to address everything in Numbers 25, but I really want you to think about what's happening or what happened during that time, and think about the position that the leaders were in. Okay, so let's start. So verse 1, Numbers 25, starting at verse 1. It says, while Israel was staying in Shittim, and I'm reading from the NIV, the men began to indulge in sexual immorality with Moabite women. Now, just so you know that the Moabites, that people, the history of them, they were from the lineage of Lot, okay? And the son Moab, was conceived in incest, okay, between Lot and his eldest daughter. So right from the beginning, you see a thread of sexual immorality starting from generations back, okay? So just kind of process that for a little bit. So here it is, Israel again is in Shittim, and they start to indulge in sexual immorality with Moabite women. These women invited them to the sacrifices to their gods. The people ate and sacrificed meals and bowed down before these gods. So Israel yoked themselves to the Baal of Peor, and the Lord's anger burned against them. The Lord said to Moses, and this is an important part to remember because I'm going to focus on this. The Lord said to Moses, take all the leaders of the people, kill them, and expose them in broad daylight before the Lord, so that the Lord's fierce anger may turn away from Israel. So Moses turned and said to the Israel judges, each of you must put to death those of your people who have yoked themselves to the Baal of Peor. Then an Israelite man, as they were doing this, they're talking, they're in Congress talking. Then as an Israelite man brought into the camp a Midianite woman right before the eyes of Moses and the whole assembly of Israel, while they were weeping at the entrance to the gate of meeting. When Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, saw this, he left the assembly, took a spear in his hand, and followed the Israelite into the tent. He drove the spear into both of them, right through the Israelite man and into the woman's stomach. Then the plague against the Israelite was stopped. But those who died in the plague numbered 24,000. The Lord said to Moses, Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, has turned my anger away from the Israelites, since he was as zealous for my honor among them as I am. I did not put an end to them in my zeal. Therefore, tell them I am making my covenant of peace with him. He and his descendants will have a covenant of lasting priesthood, because he was zealous for the honor of his God and made atonement for the Israelites. The name of the Israelite who was killed with the Midianite woman was Zimri, son of Salu, the leader of a Simeonite family. So again, here it is. one of the children of the leaders, one of the princes, you call them, again, committing the sin, right? Committing the sin. And then the name of the Midianite woman who was put to death was Cosbi, daughter of Zur, a tribal chief of a Midianite family. Again, another person of influence and power, right? Okay. The Lord said to Moses, treat the Midianites as enemies and kill them. They treated you as enemies when they deceived you in the pure incident involving their sister Cosbi, the daughter of a Midianite leader, the woman who was killed when the plague came as a result of that incident. So, as I said, there is a lot to unpack in this scripture. But in general, the theme is there was national sexual sin, right? There was idolatry. There was rebellion, blatant rebellion. But there was also a call to action, right? And leadership had a role. So just pause for a minute there and think about all of that, and think about our current society, and think about you as a leader, whether it be in government, in the church, in business, right? What's your role in this whole thing? Not to be answered here, but just think about it. All right, God chooses leaders for a purpose. And really and truly, part of what we need to do is really to seek God about that, right? What's the purpose? You know, in this season, my purpose is, I think, I'm walking it out right now just in presenting this information. Some of you have a higher purpose, a higher call, but God has chosen you and chosen you for a purpose. So for example, David, God sent the prophet Samuel to anoint David. When you're a leader, you're anointed for a purpose, okay? One of the things that God did though, and I think in general, before even sending that anointing, is to really look at your heart, because God looks at a person's heart, and therefore an assigned leader, God has truly sought their heart condition. God knows their heart condition. We don't. We see the outside. Elisha. In this example, when Elisha was chosen, he was plowing in a field, and Elijah, based on God's instructions, walked up to him and put the mantle on this young man. And if you read the scripture, Elisha ended up like giving away, sacrificing, telling his parents goodbye, and followed Elijah. He gave up everything and followed Elijah. Moses was 80 years old, okay? He was 80 years old tending sheep when the angel of God sent an angel, appeared to him in the burning bush, and then commissioned him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. So even at 80 years old, God can commission you for the purpose that he has for you. In the New Testament, and this again, as a leader, something to kind of think about as you select your leaders, right? Praying to God, putting the matter of that selection, who God wants to be part of your organization, putting it in God's hands to choose the leader to be assigned under your stewardship. Why? Because God knows people's hearts. They prayed, Lord, you know everyone's heart. Show us which ones to bring under this apostolic ministry in this example. So I would just say to you, you know, as you are establishing your organization, or as you're working to grow your organizations, or the leaders that you have there, maybe the time that we're in is a time of transition. Maybe it's a time to transition some of the leaders that you currently have in place out. Ask God who need to be by your side. Again, God chooses leaders for a purpose. Sometimes it's to teach us a lesson. And the example here is in 1 Samuel, where the people, the Israelites, rejected God as their leader and wanted a king because they wanted to follow what everyone else was doing. Okay? So God said, okay, you've rejected me. I'm going to give you a king. And he gave him Saul. Right? God heard and allowed them to have the leader they wanted. And that to me speaks very loudly, because sometimes we ask for things that we really don't want. We think we want it, but we don't. Sometimes God is merciful to say no, but sometimes God allows us to have what we want. They were pleased at first, as I said, but in the end, they realized that it wasn't a good request. They were better off, absolutely and always better off with God being their leader than some man. So as leaders, we're obligated to seek God for direction and wisdom to lead. It's imperative and critical for our success. So what are some of the characteristics that of these people, right? So you can use this information to kind of evaluate yourself, because, you know, it starts with yourself first, right? Evaluate your own heart condition and then evaluate your leaders, right? So Moses, as an example, was a very humble person. He didn't let authority get to his head. Some people, you can't trust them with power and authority. It gets to their head. They are abusive when they get power and authority. David, with all of his faults, God considered him a man after his own heart. David loved God. He had a heart towards God. Ask yourself, where's my heart? Is it towards God, or is it towards other things, other idols, other money, other gods? Daniel was obedient, okay? He was obedient even to the point of losing his life if necessary. As a leader, how obedient are you to the call that God has in your life? Are you willing to lose your life for the purpose that God has called you? Paul, okay? Great leaders suffer. So if you want to be a leader, and if you want to be a great leader, you may have to endure suffering. Nehemiah was bold. As a leader and as a great leader, you have to be courageous. Not be afraid of what other people think or do. What has God called you to do? What is God telling you to do? Where's your boldness in order to be obedient? There's Deborah. She was courageous. There's Peter. Peter was a little bit peculiar, right? The thing that when I researched this and found this text, the person said, Peter was a rock of offense to the Jews. Have you offended others, but maybe for the right reasons? Have you compromised? Or are you a rock of offense? And he was also a rock of faith to those who believed. Sometimes we have to stand our ground as a leader. We cannot compromise, or we should not compromise the word of God. All right, so Leaders govern organizations, whether it be big or small or middle size. Even if you have one or two people, if you're a leader, you're governing an organization. And so as I think about Numbers 25, again, like I said, there's a lot to unpack in Numbers 25. And as you read it, you may not have thought it was about leadership, but that's what stood out to me. And what stood out to me is there was an order within those people and the governing of those people. And if you know a little bit of the history, Moses' father-in-law instructed Moses how to set up the organizational structure, because initially Moses was a one-man shop, okay? All the people would line up for miles and miles and miles and bring him their problems, looking for solutions, good, bad, or indifferent. And Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, who was a Midianite, he said, Moses, listen, you cannot continue to do this. You have to delegate, form an organization so that you can be effective. So what was the governance structure, as I perceive it, in Numbers 25, okay? So Moses was a CEO, and CEO at email was moses@israel.god, okay? So Moses, as CEO at the time, was to represent the people before God and bring their matters before God. He was the leader, he was a judge, he was a counselor, everything. Moses' responsibility was to teach the people the laws, God's laws and decrees, okay? He was responsible and accountable, and I'm using those words for a specific reason. I'll show you why in a few. But he was responsible and accountable to show the people the way to live and the duties that they are to perform. So if you think about what happened in Numbers 25, one of the questions I have at the end of this is, was Moses a successful leader? Right? Just kind of think about that. Moses, again, in forming an organization, Jethro recommended to him and counseled him to say, hey, you need to select God-fearing, capable people, men, right, and women from all the people and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. So think about your organization. What's the wise counsel that you need, right, in order to effectively structure your organization based on the size that it is right now and based on even the culture that you're in. In this example, because he had millions that he was shepherding, he had an organizational structure that was quite hierarchical, okay? And I'll show that in a minute. So lesson number one, I talked about the small group decentralized model that Jesus utilized in the New Testament, the New Covenant. So for Jesus's organization for evangelism, he practiced a small distributed approach to leadership, right? Jesus had the 3 close disciples, then he had the larger 12 disciples, then he had the 72 that went out, and then the multitudes, right? And they all dispersed in a distributed fashion. But there was still governance, right? There was still order, right? They still had a governance model. You had the people who would come to Christ and then to God, or the people, can go to God, obviously. But there was still order. Every organization needs a governance model, whether it's a small distributed model or a more hierarchical governance model. So here is where we get a little bit deep. Like I said, I don't know how much exposure each of you have had to the Hebraic and reading the Hebrew. I don't speak Hebrew fluently. I know enough to get myself in trouble, but God has truly put a love in my heart for his word in Hebrew. And one of the things that I do in studying God's word, I don't just read the surface. I will go and research what is it saying in the Hebrew. And in the New Testament, obviously, is the Greek, but I also try to find resources where even the Greek translation is translated somewhat in Hebrew. Okay. But I personally love the Old Testament. I don't know, that's just me. Because right before I got licensed as an evangelist in 2009, I asked the Lord, I said, the Lord just started putting a love for the Hebrew in my heart, and I didn't understand why. And so I needed to be in a place where I could be taught how to understand God's word. And so the ministry that I currently attend, that's where a lot of the information and the education around the Hebrew came from. And just the exposure to that deeper analysis and understanding of God's word has grounded me so much and has really put a love for God and his word in my heart. Okay. And I'm hoping that just this initial exposure, if it is an initial exposure for you, will help you also to develop a love for God's word and to look deeper. So what we're looking at here is a governance structure, as I see it based on my knowledge and what's spoken to in Numbers 25. So you have the people or the nations. And in fact, let me just explain something. The numbers here, H5971 as an example, is the Strong's number and so you can look up what I'm saying and do your own analysis. But for example, in the scripture, when it talks about the people, it's really not just talking about people, the nations, the nation. When it talks about that in Numbers 25, the nation was in idolatry. Okay? If you think about where we are in this time, our nation is not God-fearing. Our nation is in idolatry. And so I ask you again, why has God made sure that you are born in this time, right? He's called you, appointed you. You have a purpose for this time and this season, turning people back to God. So the nations, then above the nations in order, right, of governance were the judges, chiefs, or officials, right? And that Hebrew word is shepat, and you'll see it here. They were to judge and govern and vindicate and punish, and they were chiefs of the people. So I want you to think about it when the word of God said to Moses, right? Take all the leaders of these people and kill them. I think to myself, who was really accountable to those people? How did it get there? That God would say, Moses, go kill all these leaders. That's serious business. Above the judges, the chiefs of the people is Moses, and then above Moses is God. Okay, Moses' name is Moshe. You see, Moses was the prophet and the lawgiver, the leader of the Exodus. And then you have God, the proper name of God, Jehovah, Yahweh. Here is at the top where my mouse is, the Hebrew for Yahweh, the Yod, He, Vav, He. It's called the Tetragrammaton. The English call it, the Greek, Jehovah, Yahweh, again. But there's also the name of God, El. And this Hebrew word, Aleph, and the L, right? The A and the L is another name for God. And I'm highlighting that because I'm going to show you something. So this word means strength, power, leader, chief, mighty. And here's the Strong's. You can go look it up. So just remember that. Okay, so the governance structure. Moses's org chart, as I see it. God, Moses, the hundreds, the 50s, the tens. Okay. Look at Exodus 18. Moses had a centralized hierarchical model as compared to a distributed model. And why? Because he had a lot of people and he needed delegates. All right, so some leadership lessons based on Jethro's model. So effective leaders, because one of the things we want to be is an effective leader. We need to know our limitations. We need to stand before God for the people who he's assigned to us to lead. We need to teach our people. We need to create teams to be effective, to help us to lead. We need to be able to delegate. But I want you to think about that word, because one of the things we have to think about is, what are you delegating, right, in terms of authority? You do have to delegate, but there needs to be some wisdom to that. We need to create a system of accountability. Were those leaders, was Moses being accountable to God in this situation? And as effective leaders, we also need to empower. So I love this queen and king combinations to say you have to delegate some authority. Can't do it all yourself, but you need to do it with some wisdom weaved in. All right, so let me go, and I want to talk and I want to teach you a little bit, if you're not familiar with the word you see here. So the Aleph, which is this, the first letter reading from left to right, and the Lamed, God's name, El. It also means a leader's authority, okay? Give me a second here, let me switch and switch screens so that you can get this little bit of teaching. Just teaching you a couple of things about the Word of God. So let's talk about the first one. If you cannot hear it, let me know.
The first letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Aleph. The numeric value of Aleph is 1. Hebrew words for God, El and Elohim, start with an Aleph. The word for father, Av, starts with an Aleph. Also, the words for I am, Ehyeh, a sign from God, Ot, light, Or, truth, Emet, love, Ahava, Amen, all start with the letter Aleph. The pictogram or symbol behind the shape of the letter Aleph is an ox head with horns. It symbolizes power and leadership. The name of the letter Aleph sounds like Aluf. Aluf in Hebrew means chief, the leader. It also means a close friend or partner or ally or companion. Aleph, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, indicates what is number one, what is preeminent. Now, look at what the New Testament says.
Okay, I'm going to pause that there. Let's talk about Lamed. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is that when you read the English Bible, you don't see these things. It's when you look at things in the Hebrew that you see the greater depth of God's word and meaning, okay?
The 12th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Lamed. The numeric value of Lamed is 30. The pictogram or symbol behind the shape of the letter Lamed is a staff. A staff is a symbol of authority. It's not the same as a scepter. The scepter is the pictogram for the Hebrew letter Zayin. That represents the symbol of authority of a king. The scepter of a king was also held in the hand. It was smaller than a staff, but it was made of gold. This staff is a wooden rod. It could be used to prod someone, to get them moving. Moses carried a staff. Look at this line of letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Lamed is the only letter.
Okay, I'm going to pause that there. And then I think I will do one more, and then I will go back to the PowerPoint.
The word El is spelled Aleph Lamed. Again, the Aleph is the ox, meaning strength. The Lamed is a picture of a shepherd's staff and represents the idea of authority. The word El, from its pictographs, mean the strong authority, and is the Hebrew word that is commonly translated as God. The implication.
All right. So you heard that, right? God, authority. Okay, now let me share back to the presentation, and we'll pick back up where I left off. Hope you're doing okay. All right. So, and this is information I'll share with you again. So God, El, the strong, powerful authority, right? And here's a representation of the Paleo-Hebrew alphabet, which then over the centuries changed to be our current alphabet that we're familiar with. So Aleph means power, strong leader, and then the Lamed means authority. You remember, God is El, it's power and authority, okay? So when you think about a leader's authority, okay, you have to think about who's responsible, who's accountable, right? Also, does the problem or situation that you encounter drive your accountability as a leader? Where does your authority lie? Because you are a leader, you have that authority. You have that strong authority ordained and given to you by God. A RACI chart. For those of you who are in business, you may be familiar with this. So when I think about, again, authority and leadership, okay, who's responsible? Responsible means who needs to do the work to complete the task? Who's accountable, right? Who has the ultimately is in charge, right? They can delegate work, but in the end, they're ultimately in charge. So I think again about what happened in Numbers 25. God told Moses something. Moses then told the leaders something, what God said. And if you think about it, the people were still forcefully rebellious. There's a problem there, okay? So again, in Numbers 25, the Lord said to Moses, the Lord, Yahweh, gave that leader's authority to Moses. Now, again, you will not see this in the English Bible. You'll see it in the Hebrew. That authority, God gave that authority to Moses. Moses, you need to do something. Okay? And God said to Moses, okay, do something. Kill those leaders. But what did Moses do? Moses then delegates this to Israel's judges. Moses gives his authority over to those judges. So my question to you as a leader is, when is it appropriate for you to delegate and transfer authority? And again, does the problem or situation drive your accountability? So things to consider, and I'm trying to do this so we'll have enough time for discussion. What is the responsibility of the leader in delegating authority? Now, Moses did appoint officials, and it was important for him to do that. But when and which matters are too big for you as the leader, the accountable person, to delegate? Moses, yes, he had to trust his leaders. But his leaders also need to discern what is their responsibility and what isn't their responsibility. Okay? Which matters should Moses have been responsible for, and which matters are the leaders to be responsible for? And can you recognize and can you train and have discernment, right? Train up your leaders, right? To recognize when matters that are too great for them need to be deferred to a higher authority. So is it possible that when Moses told them to take care of that, what God told Moses to do, they should have said, and this is just Anne speaking, they should have said, you know, Moses, really that's your accountability. That's too much for us to be accountable for. So my recommendation, again, my suggestion is know how and when to discern, to defer, and to delegate. Okay? So what was observed in the situation, and what was leadership's response, and was it appropriate? Okay? And in this situation, did Moses fail as a leader, and did the judges fail as a leader? Okay? So I want to open up the lines here. Let's see. If you can unmute yourselves, that'll be awesome. Let me see if I can unmute all.
I'm unmuted.
Okay, great. So I'd love some feedback, Gerard. What do you think? What in terms of a leader, because you lead a large organization and you've had experience, a lot of experience with leadership. What do you think?
Well, also, I just want to share, Kathy is with me, and we're both really appreciating this training. I think it's very, very timely and very good.
Yeah, I really like the Hebrew. I like how you break down the Hebrew.
Oh, thank you, Kathy.
So I do have a question. When God told Moses to kill the leaders, right? How do you delegate? How do you delegate that? Because you know, because I mean, I just don't understand that. At the same time, I got to admit that that's a pretty Moses has been in a tough situation. He's got a tough boss. I mean, Moses, God is it's amazing that we have both the grace and the and forgiveness, but yeah, it just points out. I mean, just obeying God is tough. It's tough. Many things are a tough ask. So I don't have an answer to your question, but I certainly empathize with Moses, and were his leaders were not indulging in the sexual immorality, were they?
You know, I don't know for sure. They may have been. They may have been. You know, there's so much to really question as to what really happened in this situation. But when I think about it, something was off, right? Where that particular Israelite was so bold that while they were in Congress, and it said that they were at the gates crying. So crying could either be they were in repentance, or if when I searched the word, that crying really was indicative of like complaining. So possibly instead of them acting, they're sitting around complaining, or they're sitting around repenting. I'm not quite sure which one it is. It would be interesting to do a further study of that. but somehow, some way, the people felt as if they could do whatever they wanted to do, and especially people in leadership, because both the man and the woman in this example were people of stature, right? They were maybe a prince and a princess, or some child of of a person in high position. So maybe those leaders, they allowed it to happen because they didn't want to cause any stir, right? They did not want to have conflict with other people in leadership.
And what when you were in the military, what were you in? What did you do in the military?
I was an E4. I was a non-commissioned. Yeah.
Okay. Army or
Army.
Army?
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I don't remember if it was this conversation that we had last week about when a commander takes over a unit, how he has to sign for all the equipment. Did we talk about this last week?
I don't remember that.
All right. I had the good fortune of taking on a unit, and I literally had to go through the accountability of all the people and the equipment. And they made it very clear if we lost a machine gun, if we lost something, right, that I had to pay for it. I was accountable for it, right? Which is why I learned later why the captain goes down with the ship, because he can't afford to pay for that thing, right? And the ultimate leader responsible for them was Moses.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So if leadership goes to the top, right? In the military, what do they always say? You send the praise down, you take the blame up, right? You always assume. And so if God told Moses to kill the leaders, he should have started with himself.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
I mean, who's the leader?
How do you reconcile that in current times, right? In situations where you are accountable for the outcome, good or bad, of an organization. How do you ensure that you're monitoring, right? And making sure that your people really understand the rules of the road and taking action quickly? Because one of the things that, what's his name? Phineas did was he took quick action. When everybody else is sitting around, he said, hold on for a minute here. I got to defend God now.
Yeah.
Right? And when he did that, God stopped the plague.
It's fascinating how many times God brought judgment and then he changed his mind, right? And as a leader, when you have a subordinate, it maybe really screws it up, right? Look at all the times where God's judgment was executed swiftly. At the same time, look at the many times that God showed grace, right? And his heart turned. And I think that when you're talking about discernment, as a leader, when you have a subordinate that really screws up, right? Trying to know their heart and realizing, okay, is this an opportunity for grace and restoration, right? Or do I need to cut this cancer out, act swiftly, right? And I think that we as leaders have to go to God for the answer there.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I'm going to be quiet and let other people have a chance.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else?
Hello, everyone. I'm sorry. This is Pastor Midget and Angela. I know in being a pastor of a ministry, we can go through an array of assessments, but having the fear of God and reverencing the Lord, understanding that God is a God of love, but also he is a God of reverence, and he despises sin, and God understands the repercussions of what sin can do to a ministry, to a flock. And I think when you look at sometimes the sternness of the Lord, because God looks excuse me, every sheep is important to the Lord, but God understands the ramifications of how sin can be such a cancer. And if it's in the leadership, it can disseminate and spread down into the flock. I believe it's also important for, as the one gentleman was sharing there, the brother, it's important to seek the Lord and for discernment on motives and intents of leaders that you have in position, because sometimes leaders are in training and in development, and sometimes they can make mistakes, but their motive and intents were right. But it is important for the leader to have the courage in love to be able to confront the matter, to bring it forward without feeling like he or she may be trying to avoid conflict. Sometimes when people are placed in leadership, they can be in a position of status, or they may be instrumental or vital to the ministry. And sometimes leaders have to be very careful not to feel like they can't go to that particular person because they've been there for a long time, or they've served, or they've been loyal. They have to maintain their commitment to God first, and understand that whether they've served faithfully or whether they're a new a sheep or disciple, that leaders have to be careful not to get into favoritism, because of God holds them accountable. And so that's just one of the things that that the Lord deals with my heart is being accountable unto Him, not having a respect of persons. But if it's someone that's been there for a long time in ministry, and if there's an issue, you have to have the courage to be able to deal with them, sit down, talk about it, discuss it, or correct it in love. It has to be in love. Faith worketh by love. That's so important as well.
Thank you. Good, good. Dia, did you want to say something?
I did. I think in answering the questions like when we should delegate, I think of course, we want to be discerning, but I think as leaders, we also have to know the capabilities of the people that we're overseeing. So when Moses says to his people, go ahead and kill them. These people, they need to be killed. Are we telling someone to do something that is incapable of following through or doesn't have the ability?
Good point.
So I mean, if we're speaking to a bunch of let's just say sharecroppers, and we're telling them to go and kill, that's not the same as talking to maybe a person or a group who is shepherds and who are used to protecting the flock and maybe have had to kill in order to do so. So I think as a leader, it's not just about delegating, it's about knowing your people and knowing who, by knowing, not just by discernment, but also because it's relational, knowing who you can delegate these things to, who has the capability, who has the willingness. All of those things have to be evaluated before you can just go tell people just go and do this.
Exactly. I mean, that's where I have here which matters are too great for the officials, right? They have to know when to defer to higher authority. Like I said, back to the capability, right? Was it for them to do? Are they capable of doing that? Was that matter too great to be delegated out?
And it may have been too great for the group. And that's why as a leader, you have to know your subordinates individually. You have to know each person's capability. You can't just speak holistically to a group and say, carry out such a large task, because not everyone, because there'll be confusion.
Yeah.
For one, you're going to have the people who do have the capability and the heart in this case to do it. And then you're going to have the people who were just standing there and frozen, who are operating in confusion and causing confusion and chaos because that's not their capability, that's not their personality, that's not a task that they can easily carry out.
Mhm. Exactly.
So when you delegate, you're delegating to people that you know are capable of carrying out a task, especially when it comes to a task that great. You're not speaking to the masses. At this point, you are handpicking the people who are tried and true, or people who you know have experience in this area, and then you're delegating and saying, based on your experience, based on my relationship, my understanding of what you used to do, we're going to put you over here to do this. We're not speaking to everyone.
Mhm, mhm. Good point. So we have about 3 minutes left. Any other? Yes, go ahead.
So it seems like Moses was disobedient in answering God, because God said, "Kill your leaders." How so? how- By delegate, who's going to delegate if you kill your leaders? Who are
But
you
didn't God
delegating to?
tell him to kill those leaders that Moses then gave the job to?
Exactly.
There's a lot to
I didn't hear that, like, the last part. I didn't hear what the last part, what Kathy said.
So the leaders that Moses has handed this task off to the leaders. Aren't they the ones that God told him
To
to
kill.
kill? And where was Moses' trust in God when this horrible assignment came down? This is a horrible assignment. This is where I would think somebody would question the authorities that are over them, like the captain of that ship that was told that his men were not allowed to get onto Guam because they were infected with COVID. So he went around authority and wanted to do it his way. So Moses is going around authority and
Yeah.
passing.
Moses is doing what he wants to do. He's not being obedient to God.
Yeah, there's a lot to think through on this. I mean, even in our own lives as leaders, right? Because again, we are going to be tested. You know, we are going to have to make decisions and be discerning. You know, one of the things that I thought about too as I read this was about positioning, right? And I didn't go back and search the lineage all the way down to say, why were they in Shittim? Why were they where they could have been enticed, right?
Yeah.
Well, again, possibly, and again, I don't know the history behind it, but just made me think, if I didn't position myself in a place close to the sin, right, then I would not have possibly been. And it was the way the women entice the men, tempt them, was, you know, hey, why don't you come over to dinner? Why don't you let us have lunch? And then lunch turned into dinner, which turned into let's go, you know, sit in our tent and have a drink, which then turned to let's sleep together, which then turned to let us sacrifice to the Baal of Peor, right? So again, as a leader, being discerning, who are you aligning yourself with, right? Where are you positioning yourself? Who are you allowing to get close to you? All those things we have to be discerning about, and really take those things to God. God,
hello.
Hello? Oh, God, you know, help me as a leader, right? Help me. That's why Solomon, I could see why Solomon said, Lord, give me wisdom to be able to lead your people, even though Solomon did his own thing at the end of the day. But we really, as leaders, need to seek God for direction on every aspect of what we need to do as leaders.
What a mess that was. What a mess.
So anyway, it's 5 o'clock. I want to be respectful of time. I am so appreciative of every single one of you who, you know, thought enough of me and the Word of God to give me an hour of your time to share my heart with you, to impart to you, with hope that it will touch your heart, and that you will seek God more and more and go deeper into His Word to get revelation knowledge.
And I learned something very important about you today.
What's that?
When you look in the mirror, you see a diva.
actually gave me that many years ago, and I just have it up there, but it is true.
Thank you so much. This was
Thank
really
you,
great.
Ann.
I'm really
Yeah.
looking for you to do this again next month.
Okay, yeah, next month. Let's see what God leads me to craft for you all. Thank you so much.
All
And
right.
More
Dr.
Hebrew, please. More Hebrew next month as well.
Yeah, Kathy loves the Hebrew, so
Okay.
we vote for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Have a great
Yes,
day.
thank you. Thank you. Bye,
Bye.
everybody. Love you guys. Love you.
Can you send us a copy also, please?
I will.
Thank you, Dr. Ingram.
Thank you. All right, we'll do.
Okay.
Dr. Ingram, can you stay on the line when everyone gets off?
Yes, let me stop the recording. Okay, hold on.